friends. Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit here and there today. I'm gonna switch off all the sound effect. Alright. I like some voices. Okay. Sorry, I should have done that before. So unprofessional. Hello, good morning, everyone. I can see Deanne is in my stream despite not being able to be in game. That's why I look so sad right now. And okay, so this is what's going to happen. Um, remember my complaints about my CPU is going to burst into flames one of these days, which is a true story, by the way. Um, mm, so what's going to happen is that I bought a new computer, which cost me a lot of money, but I have the support of Zapok. Zapok is helping me a little bit with the fund. So I should be getting the new PC on next Monday, and then oh yeah, by the way, just so you know, next Monday there is no Noodibles, unfortunately, because I have an appointment. I have to go out and actually be a real person. I know, controversial. I should have no life. Yet here I am. I have to go out on Monday. So the PC should be ready by Monday. I'm gonna go out and get it, and then I'm gonna set it up and everything. So next week's schedule for Noodibles would be on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday instead. Instead of the usual Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Um, Today's gonna be a bit of a busy day for me. I'm gonna be streaming right now for Noodibles for about a couple hours for the reading. And then tonight, if you are interested in watching me play a first person shooter game, um, called Borderlands 1, I will be streaming at 7 p.m. GMT plus 8. I'll be playing with my friends, Strudel, who is also a fellow uh, streamer dude. So anyway, my point is, I'm everywhere. My point is I bought a new computer. Good morning, Chloe. I bought a new computer. It costs a lot of money, but Zapbox helping me with the cost. Um, and it will run a lot better. Like the CPU is very good. Like a Gen 12 i5 Intel CPU, whatever that means, cause I don't know anything about computer, right? But mm, um, and then I will be able to stream and play the game with high specs, hopefully. Oh, who is that? Oh, it's Kiana. Oh, I haven't seen Kiana in a while. Good morning, Kiana. Good morning. Good morning. So, point is, I'll have a good computer. I can stream and use my avatar, and my avatar will be able to move as it did before my CPU started to um, give me a lot of trouble. So I'll be able to stream nicely with a moving avatar, and also my game wouldn't lag. I wouldn't be lagging in game, and also my CPU usage wouldn't be up in the flames of like 100% from next week onwards. So hopefully I'll be able to set up everything on Monday, and then on Tuesday onwards we will have a great um, we will have a great time streaming the game as we do our reclears, our weekly reclears, as well as our MSQ, as well as Noodibles, and also streaming other games like uh, yeah, it's good stuff. I mean, this current PC has been like 4 years. It's time for an upgrade anyway. The initially I just wanted to like upgrade the CPU, but because CPU nowadays are really expensive, so we just thought that it's just best for me to just get a whole new computer. So yeah, hooray! Of course. Thank you so much for Kiana and Wine for being here with me. My manager, Diane, unfortunately couldn't make it. But yeah, thank you, Chloe, for being here. Today, as usual, we are continuing our reading of Kokoro, which means heart, or in any case, it also means heart of things, like just feelings in usual. And so far, the story is pretty heavy thus far, and it's just like couple of chapters in and all that, and we are still in the thing with Natsume Soseki's novels is that they don't really go by normal chapters, they go by volume, and we are currently still in the first volume. The first volume is called Sensei and I. So we are still currently in the first volume called Sensei and I, and we stopped at page 26 the last time. 26. We are on page 26. I stopped where the asterisk stopped the last time. So yeah, that's good. That's good that you bought the book. It's very good to bring books. You know what happened? Noodibles really reignited the joy in reading in me. That I actually bought two new books, in the past week. But yeah, I'm not gonna read them anytime soon. I'm still trying to like figure out what's a good pace to read, like which book to read first. But after Kokoro is not going to be Natsume Soseki books anymore, because it seems like I think a lot of people find it very depressing. So I'm going to try to read another book, an author that I've never heard before, and it's it is his first book, and apparently it's a Japanese bestseller. So I'm not going to tell you the name of the book, so it's going to be announced on the day when I start reading it. But yeah, I'm going to read a book that is neither Natsume Soseki nor Kazuo Ishiguro, who are both who are my favorite authors. It's going to be a new Japanese author that I've never heard before. So it's gonna be interesting because I've never read that book before. It's going to be a new experience to all of us. So, without further ado, yeah, Kokoro is a really good book. But at the same time, Wine, don't get too affected by the words. I think I think you interpret the book a lot heavier than you should be. From what I have seen, it sure is a very realistic and a very realistic portrayal of life book. But at the same time, in life, where there is pessimism, there is also optimism. Where there is darkness, there is also light. So don't just focus too much on the darkness of the book or the negative or the pessimism of the book. Do try to, like, that's why you got the hangman card. Remember, that is basically why you got the hangman card. It's a sign to you from the universe, you know? I don't like I don't take tarot cards seriously, but sometimes you get that kind of divine intuition, and I think the universe is trying to tell you something. You have to remember the hangman card, that you have to look at things in a very different light and a different perspective a lot of times. So don't just read this book and then agree with all the pessimism in it. Try to find yourself to disagree with the points in the book, because The book is very dark, yes. The Yeah, I'm getting long-winded, I know. And I'm getting readers coming in. And it's perfect time. It's 11 past 11. It's a perfect time for us to start reading the book. So, with a sip of tea, I am going to start reading the book named Kokoro by Natsume Sōseki. That winter, I was obliged to go home. Oh, wait, hang on. Oh, we stopped at 27. Sorry. Oh my god. I'm so unprofessional. Okay. We are on page 28, by the way. I stopped at page 27 and then I forgot to put the bookmark on page 28 because I am an idiot. Okay. Natsume Soseki's Kokoro, page 28, under the chapter Sensei and I. My father was not as ill as I had expected. When I returned, I found him sitting up in the bed. "I've been in a bed like this," he said, "to keep the others from worrying. I'm really well enough to get up." The next day he left his bed much against my mother's wishes. "Because you are here, your father has convinced himself that he is better," my mother said, but it did not seem to me that he was putting up a brave front for my sake. My elder brother worked in distant Kyushu and therefore could not visit my parents unless he felt there was a pressing need for him to do so. My elder sister was married and lived in another province. She also could not easily come home. I, being a student, was therefore the only one of the three children that my parents could call home freely. Sorry, just one moment, please. Oh, sorry. One moment, please. I forgot about the emote. So unprofessional today. My father was nevertheless very pleased that I should have returned soon after receiving my mother's letter, without waiting for the end of term. "I'm so sorry that your studies had to be interrupted," said my father. "There has been altogether too much fuss about my slight illness. Your mother writes too many letters." He seemed to have recovered his normal health. "You will be ill again," I said, "unless you take better care of yourself." He brushed aside my admonition and said cheerfully, "Don't you worry. I shall be all right so long I look after myself, and I have always done." Indeed, my father seemed well enough. He wandered around the house with no sign of strain whatsoever. He looked very pale, it is true, but since this was not a new symptom, we paid little attention to it. I wrote to Sensei thanking him for the loan. I said that I would be returning to Tokyo this January, and that if he did not mind, I would wait until then to repay him. I told him that my father was better than I had expected, and little there seemed little cause for immediate anxiety, and that he had suffered neither fainting fits nor nausea. I concluded the letter with a polite inquiry about his call, which I was inclined to regard as a matter of little concern. "Hello, Exia." It's so easy to recognize Exia. She never changed. She always looks the same. I mean, in a very good way, very recognizable way. Just like wine, always wearing wine red clothing. I wrote the letter with no expectations of receiving a reply from Sensei. After I had posted it, I told my parents about him, and as I did so, I found myself thinking of Sensei in his study. When you go back to Tokyo, why don't you take him some dried mushrooms? Thank you, but I wonder if Sensei eats such things as dried mushrooms. They may not be a delicacy, but surely no one dislikes them. Somehow I could not bring myself to associate dried mushrooms with Sensei. I was rather surprised when a letter from Sensei arrived. I was even more surprised when I read it, for it seemed to have been written for no particular purpose. Sensei had kindly written, I decided in reply to my letter that he should have troubled to do so made me very happy. In case I have unwittingly given the impression that there was much correspondence between Sensei and myself, I should like to say here that in all the time I knew Sensei, I received from him only two pieces of correspondence that might strictly be called letters. One of them was simple was the simple letter that I have just mentioned, and the other was a very long letter which he wrote me shortly before his death. My father, not being allowed to be very active, hardly ever left the house after he got up. On a rather sunny day, he stepped out into the garden. I was worried and kept close to his side, and when I tried to persuade him to lean on my shoulder, he laughed and would not listen to me. To help my father forget his boredom, I often played chess with him. We were both by nature very lazy. We would sit on the floor with a foot warmer between us and a large quilt covering the foot warmer and our bodies from the waist down. We would then place the chessboard between us on the frame of the foot warmer. After every move, we would put our hands back under the quilt, determined not to sacrifice comfort for the sake of the game. Sometimes we would lose a pawn or two and not discover the loss until we were ready to start another game. It amused us all when once my mother found the lost pieces among the cinders in the foot warmer and had to retrieve them with a pair of tongs. One good thing about chess is that we can play it in this comfortable position, my father once said. It's an ideal game for lazy people like us. The trouble with Go is that the board is too high and it has legs too, and we couldn't very well put it between us on the foot warmer and play on it. How about another game of chess? Whether he won or lost, my father always wanted to play another game. It seemed that he would never tire of playing chess. At first, I was willing enough to play with him. It was a novel experience for me to while away the time thus as if I were an old man in retirement. But as the days went by, I began to weary of this inactive life. I was too full of youthful vigor to be contented with the role of playmate for my father. At times, in the middle of the game, I would find myself yawning heavily. I thought of Tokyo, and it seemed that with each heartbeat the yearning within me for action increased. In a strange way I felt as if Sensei was by my side, encouraging me to get up and go. I compare myself with Sensei. I compare my father with Sensei. Both were self-effacing men. Indeed, they were both so self-effacing that as far as the rest of the world was concerned, they might as well have been dead. They were, from the point of view of the public, complete non-entities. But while my chess-loving father failed even to entertain me, Sensei, whose acquaintance I had never sought for amusement's sake, gave me far greater intellectual satisfaction as a companion. Perhaps I should not have used the word intellectual, for it has a cold and impersonal sound. I should have said spiritual instead. Indeed, it would not have seemed to me then an exaggeration to say that Sensei's strength had entered my body, and that his very life was flowing in my veins. And when I discovered that such were my true feelings towards these two men, I was shocked, for I was not of my father's flesh. At about the time that I began to feel restless at home, my father and mother also began to tire of me. The novelty of having me home was wearing off. The kind of situation is probably experienced by most who return home after a long absence. For the first week or so, there was a great deal of fuss, but when the initial excitement is over, one begins to lose one's popularity. My stay at home had passed the initial stage. Moreover, each time I returned, I brought back with me a little more of Tokyo. This my father and mother neither liked nor understood. As someone in days gone by might have put it, it was like introducing the smell of a Christian into the home of a Confucianist. I tried, of course, to hide whatever changes Tokyo might have wrought in me, but Tokyo had become a part of me, and my parents could not but notice that I had changed. I ceased to enjoy being at home. I wanted to hurry back to Tokyo. Fortunately, my father's condition did not seem to grow worse. To reassure ourselves, we had an eminent doctor who lived some distance from us come and examine my father carefully. The doctor was as well satisfied as we were. I decided to leave a few days before the end of the winter vacation. Human nature being the perverse thing is that my parents opposed my decision. Leaving so soon? But you haven't been home very long, said my mother. Surely you can stay 4 or 5 days longer, said my father. But I did not change my mind. When I returned to Tokyo, I discovered that all the New Year's decoration had already been taken down. I detected little of the New Year's spirit as I walked about the cold, windy street. Soon after my arrival, I visited Sensei to return the money I had borrowed. I also took with me dried mushroom. I thought it might seem odd to produce a mushroom without some explanation, so as I put them down in front of Sensei's wife, I carefully explained that my mother had wished me to present them to her and Sensei. The mushroom had been put in a new cake box. Sensei thanked me politely and picked up the box as she rose to go to the next room. She was probably surprised by its lightness, for she said to me, "What kind of cake is this?" The more familiar one becomes with Sensei's wife, the more often she seemed to show the innocent and childish side to her character. They were both kind enough to ask about my father. "It would seem," Sensei said, "that your father is well enough at the moment, but he must be careful and not forget that he is a sick man." Sensei seemed to know all sort of things about kidney diseases that I did not know. "The trouble with your father's disease," Sensei continued, "is that the person that has it is often not aware of it. An officer I used to know died of it quite suddenly in his sleep. His wife was sleeping next to him, had no time to do anything for him. He woke her up once during the night saying that he was not feeling well. The next morning he was dead. The unfortunate thing was that his wife had been under the impression that he had gone back to sleep. I, who had been inclined to be optimistic until then, suddenly became anxious. Do you think the same thing will happen to my father? One cannot say that it won't happen, can one? What does the doctor say?" "He says that my father will never be cured, but he also says that there is no need to be worried for a while." "Well, if the doctor says so, then it's all right. The man I was telling you about was, after all, a careless man of some sort. Besides, he was a soldier. He lived rather immoderately." I was somewhat comforted by Sensei's last remark. Sensei watched me for a while, observing my relief, then said, "But men are pretty helpless creatures. whether they are healthy or not. Who can say how will they die or when? You, of all people, think this? Of course, I may be healthy, but that does not prevent me from thinking about death. Sensei smiled faintly. Surely there are many men who die suddenly, yet quietly, from natural causes. And then there are those whose sudden, shocking deaths are brought about by unnatural violence. What do you mean by unnatural violence? I am not quite sure, but wouldn't you say that people who commit suicide are resorting to unnatural violence? Then I suppose you could say that people who are murdered die also through unnatural violence. I never thought of that, but you're right, of course. Shortly afterwards, I left Sensei and went home. I did not worry very much about my father's illness that night, nor did I spend much time thinking back over what Sensei had said about death. I was more concerned with the problem of my graduation thesis, which I had tried to begin many times before but unsuccessfully. I should, I told myself, really get down to work on it very soon. I was due to graduate in June that year, and according to rules, my thesis had to be finished by the end of April. I counted the number of days that were left to me and I began to lose confidence, while the others, it seemed, had been busy for some time collecting their materials and accumulating notes. I alone had done nothing except promise myself that I would start work on my thesis in the new year. I did indeed begin in the early part of the year, but it was not long before I found myself in the state of mental paralysis. I had fondly imagined that by merely thinking vaguely about few large problems, I was building up a solid and almost complete framework for my thesis. I discovered my folly as soon as I began to begin my work seriously. I was in despair. I began to narrow down my thesis topic. And in order to avoid the trouble of having to present in a systematic manner my own ideas, I decided to compile relevant materials from various books and then add a suitable conclusion. The topic that I had chosen was closely related to Sensei's field of specialization. When I asked Sensei whether he thought such a topic was suitable, he said that it would probably be all right. I was in a state of panic, and I soon rushed back to Sensei to ask what books should I read. He willingly gave me all the information he could, then offered to lend me 2 or 3 books that were necessary for my work, but he steadfastly refused to give me any further guidance. I have not been reading much lately. I am not acquainted with up-to-date scholarship. You should ask the professors at the universities. When Sensei said this, I remembered the remark his wife once made to me that though Sensei was once an avid reader, he had since lost his old interest in books. Forgetting my thesis for a moment, I said to Sensei, "Why is it, Sensei, that you are not interested in books as you once were?" "There's no particular reason." "Well, perhaps it is because I have decided that no matter how many books I may read, I shall never be very much better man than I am now. And this is not very important, but to tell you the truth, I used to consider it a disgrace to be found ignorant by other people. But now I find myself that I am not ashamed of knowing less than others. And I am less inclined to force myself to read books. In short, I have grown old and decrepit." Sensei's manner was calm as he said this. I was not much affected by what he said, perhaps because of his tone held none of the bitterness of one had turned his back on the rest of the world. I left the house thinking him neither decrepit nor particularly impressive. From then on, my thesis hung over me like a curse, and with bloodshot eye I worked like a madman. I rushed to friends who had graduated a year before for advice on all matters. One of them told me by only catching a rickshaw to the university offices did he succeed in handing his thesis before the deadline. Another told me that he handed his thesis 15 minutes late and it would not have been accepted but for the intervention of his principal professor. Such stories made me uneasy, but at the same time they gave me confidence. Every day I worked as hard and as long as I could. If I was not at my desk, I was at the gloomy library, hurriedly scanning the titles on the high shelf as though I were some kind of curio hunter. First, the plum trees bloomed, and then the cold wind veered towards south. After a while, I heard the cherry trees were beginning to flower, but I thought of nothing but my thesis. I did not visit Sensei once but the latter part of April, by which time I had finally completed my thesis. Hello, Bit. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, Bit. Thank you for being here, Bit. One sip of tea, and I'll be right back. I was free at last when the double cherry blossoms had all fallen and in their place misty green leaves had begun to grow. It was the beginning of summer. I enjoyed my freedom like a little bird that has flown out of his cage into the open air. I soon paid Sensei a visit. On my way to his house, I noticed the young buds on the twigs of the quince hedges bursting into leaf, and I saw too the shiny brown leaves of the pomegranate tree softly reflecting the sunlight. I relished these sights as though I were seeing them for the first time in my life. Seeing my happy face, Sensei said, "So you have finally finished your thesis. I'm glad." "Yes, thanks to you. I have finished it at last. I have nothing more to do now." I felt happy, and I did think that then that since I had done what was expected of me, there was indeed nothing left for me to do but relax and enjoy myself. I viewed my thesis with a great deal of confidence and satisfaction. I chatted endlessly to Sensei about what I had said in it. Sensei listened to me in his usual way, and except for an occasional "I see" or "Is that so?" he refused to make any comment. I felt not so much dissatisfied as deflated. However, I was so full of spirit that day that I wanted to shake Sensei out of his apathy. I tried to lure him out for fresh green world outside. "Sensei, let us go for a walk. It's such a nice day." "Walk? Where?" I did not care where we went. I simply wanted to go out with Sensei. An hour later, we had left the center of the city and were walking in a quiet neighborhood that seemed almost rural. I picked a young tender leaf from a hawthorn hedge and began to whistle on it. I was rather I was a rather accomplished leaf whistler, having once been taught the trick by a friend from Kagoshima. I was I proudly persevered with my whistling for a while, but Sensei kept on walking without paying the slightest attention to me. After a while, we came to a little path which seemed to lead up to a house on a small hill. The hill was covered with a mass of green foliage. At the foot of the path was a gate, and on one of the columns was a sign telling us that we were at the entrance of a tree nursery. We then knew that the path did not lead to a private estate. Looking up at the gate, Sensei said, "Shall we go in?" I answered quickly, "Yes, they sell trees here, don't they?" We followed the winding path through the grove until we reached the house, which was on our left. The sliding doors had been left open, and we could see right into the house. There seemed to be no one about. In a large bowl in front of the house, we could see some goldfish. "It certainly is quiet around here," said Sensei. "I wonder if we should have come in without permission." "I'm sure it's all right." We walked on, and still we came across to no one. All about us azaleas flamed in all their splendor. Sensei pointed to an azalea which grew taller than the others and was reddish yellow in color. "This is what we call Kirishima, I think," he said. There were also peonies covering an area about 10 tsubo. It was too early in the summer for them to be in bloom. At the edge of this field of peonies was an old bench. Sensei stretched himself out on it. I sat on the end, began to smoke. Sensei gazed at the sky, which was so blue that it seemed transparent. I was fascinated by the young leaves that surrounded me. When I looked at them carefully, I found that no two trees had leaves of exact same color. The leaves of each maple tree, for instance, had their own distinctive coloring. Sensei's hat, which he had hung on the top of a slender cedar sapling, was blown off by the breeze. "Hello, Savory." "Good morning, Savory." "Good morning to you." I picked up the hat immediately, flicking off the bits of red soil from it. I said, "Sensei, your hat fell down." "Thank you." Sensei half rose to take his hat. Then, remaining in that position, neither sitting nor lying down, he asked me a strange question. "This may seem rather abrupt, but tell me, is your family very wealthy?" "Well, I don't suppose what we have could be described as a fortune. About how much do you have? I don't mean to be rude." "I really don't know. We own some woods and a few fields, but I suspect that we have hardly any money at all." This was the first time Sensei questioned me directly about my family finances, and I had never asked Sensei about his source of income. Of course, I did wonder how Sensei managed to live in idleness, but I had thus far restrained myself from asking Sensei about his means of support, thinking that it would be crude to do so. Sensei's questions made me forget the trees that I had been peacefully contemplating, and I suddenly found myself asking, "And you, Sensei, what kind of wealth do you possess?" "Do I look like a rich man to you?" Sensei was never expensively dressed. He had only one maid, and his house was by no means a large one. But even I, who was not of the family, could see clearly that he lived comfortably. One could hardly say that he lived in luxury, it is true, but on the other hand, there was obviously no necessity for him to stint himself. "You are rich, aren't you?" I said. "I have some money, of course, but I am by no means rich. If I were, I would build myself a larger house for one thing." Sensei by this time sitting up on the bench. As he finished talking, he began to trace a circle on the ground with his bamboo cane. When he had completed the circle, he drove his cane straight into the ground. "I was a rich man once." Sensei seems to be talking as much to himself as to me. I was at a loss as to what I should say. I kept quiet. "I was once a rich man, you know," he said again. This time, he looked at me and smiled. Still, I remained silent. I felt awkward and could not think of anything to say. Sensei then changed the subject. How is your father these days? I had received no news of my father's illness since January. My father had continued to write me a short letter every month when he sent me my money order, but he had said very little about his illness. Also, his handwriting had remained firm, and showed none of the hesitancy which one might have expected. He never tells me how he is, but I think he's quite well now. I hope you are right, but with his disease you can never tell. I don't suppose there is much hope for him, is there? I do believe, however, that he will stay as well as he is for a while yet. At any rate, I have so far received no bad news. Is that so? I assume that I assume then that Sensei question about my family's wealth and my father's illness expressed no more than normal interest in my affairs. And not knowing much about Sensei's life history, I could not guess that they implied much more than appeared on the surface. Good morning, Savri. If there is any property in your family, then I do think that you should see to it that your inheritance is properly settled now. I know that this is all none of my business, but don't you think that while your father is alive, you should make sure that you will receive your proper share? When a man dies suddenly, his estate causes more trouble than anything else. Yes, sir. I did not pay much attention to Sensei's word. It was my conviction that in all my family there was no one that bothered about such matters. I was a little shocked, too, to see Sensei being so intensely practical. I said nothing, however, as I did not wish to seem impertinent. If I have annoyed you by seemingly to anticipate your father's death, please forgive me. But we all have to die sometime, even the healthy ones. How do we know when they will die? Sensei's tone seemed unusually bitter. I don't mind at all, I said, almost in apology. How many brothers and sisters do you say you had? Sensei? He went on to ask me about my other relatives, such as my uncles and aunts. Are they all good people? Well, they aren't exactly bad. They are, after all, country people mostly. Why shouldn't country people be bad? I began to feel very uncomfortable. Sensei gave me no time to answer his last question. As a matter of fact, country people tend to be worse than city people. You just now You said just now that there was no one amongst your relatives that you would consider particularly bad. You seem to be under the impression that there is a special breed of bad humans. There is no such thing as stereotyped bad men in this world. Under normal conditions, everybody is more or less good, or at least ordinary. But tempt them, and they may suddenly change. That is what is so frightening about men. One must always be on one's guard. Sensei looked as if he wanted to continue, and I wanted to say something at this point, but suddenly a dog began to bark behind us. Surprised, we turned around. Behind the bench and next to the cedar saplings, dwarf bamboos grew thickly over a small patch of ground. The dog was looking at us over the bamboos, barking furiously. Then a boy of about 10 appeared on the scene. He ran to the dog and scolded it. He then turned around towards Sensei and without taking off his black schoolboy's cap, bowed. "Sir," he said, "was there no one in the house when you came by?" "No, there was no one." My elder sister and my mother were in the kitchen, you know. Is that so? Yes, sir. You should have called out good afternoon and then come in. Sensei smiled faintly. He pulled out his purse and finding a 5-cent piece gave it to the boy. Go to your mother and say that we would like her permission to rest here for a while.
Stretch!
Stretch! Thank you. Why? Oh, I was like trying to move around a bit for a better position to read as well. Let me change position. Thank you for the hydration claim. I'm back. Oh yeah, sip of tea. With laughter in his intelligent eyes, he nodded. At the moment I am chief of the army scouts, he said, and then rushed down the hills through the azaleas. The dog, with his tail held up, rushed after him. A moment or two later, 2 or 3 children of about the same age as the chief of scouts ran past us and disappeared down the hill. Sensei would have made the purpose of his remarks clearer to me had it not been for the sudden appearance of the dog and the boy, and I was left for a moment somewhat uncertain as to why Sensei should have spoken to me thus. Indeed, I did not share Sensei's interest in such matters as money, inheritance, and so on, partly because of my relatively easy circumstances, and partly because of my nature. Sensei's interest in such matters as money. Wait. Now, when I think of myself at that time, I see how unworldly I was. If I had known the meaning of material hardship then, I would have listened to Sensei more carefully. At any rate, money seemed to me a very distant problem. Among the things that Sensei said, what interested me the most was his remark that no man was immune to temptation. I knew more or less what Sensei meant, of course, but I wanted Sensei to talk more about this matter. After the departure of the dog and the children, the large garden became quiet once more. We sat still for a moment or two, as though made immovable by the silence around us. The beautiful sky began to slowly lose its brightness, and before us the delicate green maple leaves, which looked like drops of water just about to fall from the branches, seemed to grow darker in color. From the road below, the sound of cartwheels reach seemed to the sounds of cartwheels reached our ears. I imagined that a man from the village had loaded his cart with plants and vegetables and was on his way to the fair to sell them. Sensei stood up, as though the sound had aroused him from his meditation. Let us go home, he said. The days are becoming longer, and the dusk seems to fall quickly, and we are sitting about lazily like this. The back of Sensei's coat was dirty. I brushed it clean with my hand. Thank you. You don't see any resin marks, do you? No, it's perfectly clean now. I had this coat made only recently. If I get it too dirty, my wife would scold me. Thank you. On our way down the gently sloping path, we passed the house once more. This time we saw the lady of the house on the front porch, winding thread onto a spool with the help of a young girl of 15 or 16. Stopping by the large goldfish bowl, we said, "Thank you for your hospitality." "Not at all," said the woman, and then thanked us for the coin that her boy had received. After we had walked a few hundred yards before the gate, I suddenly said to Sensei, "What did you mean, Sensei, when you remarked that if tempted, any man may suddenly become evil?" "What did I mean?" There was no profound meaning in my remark. I was not theorizing, you understand. I was merely stating an obvious fact. I do not wish to deny that it is I do not wish to deny that it is a fact. What I want to know is exactly what kind of temptation you are referring to. Sensei began to laugh as if he no longer wished to discuss this matter seriously. "Money, of course. Give a gentleman money and he will soon turn into a rogue." Sensei's straight answer disappointed me. Sensei refused to be serious, and my pride was hurt. With a nonchalant air, I began to walk more quickly, leaving Sensei behind. "Hey!" he called to me. "You see?" he said. "What, sir?" "One simple remark, and your whole attitude towards me, you see, has changed." I had turned around to wait for Sensei, and as he spoke, he looked straight into my eyes. At that moment, I hated Sensei, and after we had resumed our walk side by side, I refrained from asking the questions I wanted to ask. I could not tell whether or not Sensei knew how I felt. At any rate, he seemed not to pay much attention to my behavior. He was his usual relaxed self as he walked silently by my side. I became spiteful. I wanted to say something that would humiliate him. "Sensei?" I said. "Yes, what is it?" "You became a little excited, didn't you, Sensei, when we were resting in the tree nursery?" "You are very rarely excited, and I feel that today I was permitted to observe a rather unusual occurrence." Sensei did not reply immediately. I thought that perhaps my remark had had their effect on him, but at the same time I could not help but being slightly disappointed. I decided to say no more. Then suddenly, Sensei left my side, walking up to a neatly trimmed hedge, and began to urinate. I stood by foolishly and waited for him. "Pardon me," he said as we set off again. I gave up all thought of trying to humiliate him. Gradually the road became busier. The open fields that had been visible to us before were now almost completely hidden by rows of houses. Even then there were sights that reminded us of the quiet countryside, such as peas growing around bamboo stakes in the private garden, and hens being kept in enclosures of wire netting. We passed an endless procession of cart horses returning from the city. I, who was inclined to become absorbed in all such details of the scene around me, soon ceased to worry about what Sensei had said. Indeed, I had totally forgotten my last words to him when he suddenly said to me, "Did I seem excited to you back there in the nursery?" "Not very, perhaps a little." "I don't mind at all your saying that I was very excited. You see, I really do become excited when I start speaking of inheritances and so on. It may seem to you so, but I have a very vindictive nature. The indignities and injuries I suffered 10 years ago, even 20 years ago, I have not forgotten. There was even less restraint in Sensei's word than there had been previously that day. What shocked me was not the tone of his voice so much as what he has actually said. I had never thought, of course, that I would ever hear such an admission from Sensei, nor imagine that there was such a tenacious streak in his character. I had believed him to be a rather weak person, and I had loved Sensei for his weakness, whether real or imagined, no less than for his virtues. I, who a short while ago had tried to pick a quarrel with him, began to feel small. I was once deceived, Sensei said. Moreover, I was deceived by my own blood relations, and I shall never forget this. When my father was alive, they behaved like decent people, but as soon as he died, they turned into scoundrels. The effect of the injury that they did me in my youth is still with me. But I have never taken my revenge on them. When I think about it, I have done something much worse than that. I have not only to hate them, but the human race in general. That is quite enough, I think. Not even words of consolation came to my lips. One moment, please. My cat looks absolutely adorable right now, and I want to take a picture. So just give me one moment. Sorry, I'm back. I'm back. I am back. He's so adorable. You know what he's doing? He's like resting his head on my pillow like a human. And he's like facing the window and it just looks so comfortable. Maybe I'll post a picture later on my Twitter. Okay, let me take a sip of tea and then I'm gonna continue. We talked no more about the subject that day. I was somewhat awed by his manner, and I did not want to ask him any more questions. When we reached the outskirts of the city proper, we boarded a tram. We hardly spoke to each other during the ride back. We parted shortly after we got off the tram. By that time, Sensei's mood had changed. Before leaving me, he said in a tone more cheerful than usual, "You'll be more carefree from now till June, won't you?" "Perhaps you will never again in your life be so free from responsibility. Enjoy yourself as much as you can." I grinned as I took off my cap, and looking at his face, I wondered how such a man could carry so much hatred in his heart. His smiling eyes and lips showed nothing of the misanthrope. I should say here that I profited considerably from my conversation with Sensei. Many times, however, I found Sensei very unsatisfactory as a mentor. I felt often that he was being purposely evasive, such was my feeling concerning our conversation that day. Being a blunt and discourteous young man, I told Sensei one day that I had often found our conversation rather inconclusive. Sensei laughed and I said, "I would not mind so much if I thought that you were too dull a person to realize that your remarks are often not very clear to me, but I do mind because I know that you could tell me much more if you wished. I hide nothing from you." "Yes, sir, you do. If it would appear that you are unable to distinguish between my ideas at the present and the events of my past, I am not much of a thinker, but a few ideas that I do have I have no wish to hide from others. I have no reason to. But if you are suggesting that I should tell you all about my past, well, that's another matter entirely. I do not agree with you. I value your opinions because they are the results of your experience. Your opinions would not be worthless otherwise. They would be like soulless dolls." Sensei stared at me in astonishment. I saw his hand, which held a cigarette, was shaking a little. "You are certainly an audacious young man," he said. "No, sir. I am simply being sincere, and in all sincerity, I wish to learn about life, even to the extent of digging up my past." Suddenly, I was afraid. I felt as though the man sitting opposite me was some kind of a criminal. Instead of the sensei that I had come to respect, Sensei's face was pale. "I wonder if you are really being sincere," he said. "Because of what happened to me, I have come to doubt everybody. In truth, I doubt you too. But for some reason, I do not want to doubt you. It may be because you seem so simple. Before I die, I should like to have one friend that I can truly trust. I wonder if you can be that friend. Are you really sincere?" "I have been true to you, Sensei," I said, "unless my whole life has been a lie." My voice shook as I spoke. "Very well, then," said Sensei. "I will tell you. I will tell you all about my past. But remember, no, never mind that. Let me simply warn you that to know my past, you may to know my past may do you no good. It may be better for you not to know. I cannot tell you just yet. Don't expect to don't expect me to tell you until the proper timing to do so has come. I returned to my lodgings with an oppressive feeling, like a sense of doom inside me. My professors apparently did not have as high as an opinion of my thesis as I did. I was, however, allowed to graduate that year. On the day of the graduation ceremony, I brought out my old and musty winter uniform from my suitcase and put it on. Everyone around me in the graduation hall looked hot. My body felt as if it had been sealed in an airtight envelope of thick wool. Very quickly, the handkerchief that I was holding in my hand was soaking wet. I went back to my lodgings as soon as the ceremony was over, and stripped to the skin. I opened the window of my room, which was on the second floor, and pretending that my diploma was a telescope, I surveyed as much of the world as I could see. Then threw the diploma down on the desk and lay on the floor in the middle of the room. In that position, I thought back over my past and tried to imagine what my future would be. I thought about my diploma lying on the desk, and though it seemed to have some significance of a kind of a symbol of the beginning of a new life, I could not help feeling that it was a meaningless scrap of paper too. Can I take a moment of pause here to say this? I personally think that higher education is not necessary in life. I personally think that working experience, life experience is much more valuable than a piece of paper, like a diploma or a degree, unless you are pursuing something like law, or like, life-saving occupations such as um, doctor, medical, surgery, that kind of thing. I think in life, most of the higher education that is offered, let's say media and communications, which is my background, they are useless. What is more important in life is your work experience and how hard you are willing to work to learn how the real life work, instead of what you learn in school and what the piece of paper can offer you. And I agree that the piece of paper, for most of the time, is just a meaningless scrap of paper. And that is my personal opinion on higher education. Let us continue with the book. That evening, I went to Sensei's house for dinner. I had promised him earlier that if I graduated, I would dine with him and not with anyone else. For this occasion, the table had been put in the drawing room near the veranda. On the table was an embroidered cloth, heavily starched. It reflected the electric light beautifully. As always, when I dined at Sensei's, I found the bowls and chopsticks neatly laid out on thin white linen, such as one sees in the European-style restaurants, and the linen was always spotless, having obviously been freshly laundered. It is the same with shirt collars and scarves. Sensei once said, if one is going to use soiled linen, one might as well start with colored linen, but white linen must always be spotless. Indeed, Sensei was a very tidy person. His study, for instance, was always in perfect order. Being rather careless myself, Sensei's tidiness often attracted my attention. Sensei is rather fastidious, isn't he? I once said to his wife. Perhaps so, she said. But when it comes to clothes, he certainly is not over careful. Sensei, who was listening to us with a laugh. To tell the truth, I have a fastidious mind. That is why I am always worrying. When you think about it, it's a terrible nuisance to have such a nature like mine. What he meant by the fastidious mind, I did not know. Neither, it seemed, did his wife. Perhaps he meant to say that he was too intensely conscious of right and wrong, or perhaps he meant that his fastidiousness amounted to something like a morbid love of cleanliness. That evening, I sat opposite Sensei at the table. His wife sat between us, facing the garden. "Congratulations," Sensei said, raised his sake cup to me. The gesture did not make me particularly happy, partly because by then I was not in such high spirits about having graduated, and partly because Sensei's tone of voice did not seem to invite a merry response from me. True, he grinned at me when he raised his cup, and I did not detect any irony in his grin. But neither did it convey happiness for my success. His grin seemed rather to say, "It is, for some strange reason, considered proper to congratulate people on such occasions like this." Sensei's wife was good enough to say, "Well done. Your father and mother must be pleased." I was suddenly reminded of my sick father by this remark and thought, I must hurry home and show my diploma to him. "What has become of your diploma, Sensei?" "I wonder. You put it somewhere, didn't you?" Sensei asked his wife. "Yes, I think so. It should be somewhere in the house." Neither of them seemed to know exactly where the diploma was. When it was time for the main course to be served, Sensei's wife sent away the maid who was sitting by her side and waited on us herself. This was their customary procedure. I believed when they had friends, rather than formal guests to dinner, the first 2 or 3 times I had dinner there, I felt somewhat ill at ease, but eventually I learned to ask Sensei's wife to refill my bowl without the slightest hesitation or embarrassment. "Tea or rice?" "You certainly eat a lot," she would say sometimes, in a pleasantly informal manner. That evening, however, I gave her no opportunity to tease me. It being summer, I did not have much an appetite. "Finished already? You certainly have become a smaller eater these days." "I would rather eat as much as ever if it weren't for the heat." After the maid had cleared the table, Sensei's wife served fruit and ice cream. "I made this myself, you know." Sensei's wife, it seemed, had so little to do in the house that she could, if she wished, serve her guests homemade ice cream. I had 3 helpings of it. "Now that you have finally graduated, what do you intend to do?" Sensei asked. He had moved his cushion towards the veranda and was leaning against the sliding door. My mind was preoccupied with the fact that I had graduated and I had not begun to think seriously about my future. Seeing me hesitate, Sensei's wife said, "Do you intend to teach?" Again, I did not reply immediately, and she added, "Or work for the government, perhaps." Sensei and I began to laugh. To be honest, I have no idea. I really had not thought much about my career. I find it difficult to decide what profession would suit me best, since I have no experience. "That may be," she said, "but it is because you people have money that you can afford to be so unconcerned about your future. You would not be so easygoing if you were in less fortunate circumstances." I knew, of course, that she was right. Some of my friends at the university had started looking for posts in secondary schools long before their graduation, but I said, "Perhaps I have been influenced by Sensei." "Really?" she said. "You shouldn't allow yourself to be influenced in such a way." Sensei smiled wryly and said, "I don't care if it's my influence or not, but as I have already said, make sure that your father will leave you a reasonable amount of money. Otherwise, you cannot afford to be easygoing." Then I remembered our conversation in the tree nursery that day in early March when the azaleas were in bloom, and I remembered his words spoken in agitation on our way back from there. They had momentarily frightened me, but I, being ignorant of Sensei's past, had not given them much thought since. Madam, I said, are you and Sensei very rich? Why do you ask such a question? I asked Sensei, and he wouldn't tell me. She laughed and looked at Sensei. Perhaps he is reluctant to tell you that because he hasn't very much. But I want to know what sum will be sufficient to enable me to live as Sensei does, so that when I speak to my father about my inheritance, I shall have some idea of what I want. Sensei was looking at the garden, calmly smoking a cigarette. His wife again had to do the answering. We don't have very much. We manage to make ends meet, that's all. Besides, what money we have has nothing to do with your fortune. You really must seriously think about your career. You must not live your life in complete idleness like Sensei. I do not live in complete idleness, said Sensei, turning his head slightly in our direction. I left Sensei's house a little earlier, a little after 10 o'clock, as I was due to go home in 2 or 3 days' time. I said a few words of farewell before rising from my seat. I shall not be seeing you for some time. I suppose you will be back in Tokyo in September, said Sensei's wife. I had no intention of coming back to Tokyo in August in the full heat of summer. I did not think that I would be seeking a post. Okay, I'll see you soon, Chloe. Have a good day. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. Can I have one moment, please? Sorry, guys. I'm gonna take a quick break in about uh, 2 minutes or so. I'll be right back. Sorry, guys. Had to attend to something. Alright. Sip of tea. Okay. I left Sensei's house a little after 10 o'clock. As I was due to go home in 2 or 3 days' time, I said a few words of farewell before rising from my seat. I shall not be seeing you for some time. I suppose you'll be back in Tokyo in September, said Sensei's wife. I had no intention of coming back to Tokyo in August, in the full heat of summer. I did not think that I would be seeking a post that soon, and in truth there was no need to return in September either, since I had finished with university. But I said, yes, I shall probably be back in September. Take good care then. Sorry. Take good care of yourself, she said. We are going to have a bad summer, apparently. We shall probably go away somewhere too. If we do, we'll send you a postcard. Where do you think you might go? Sensei, who had been listening to us with an odd grin on his face, said, We really don't know that we are going anywhere. As I was about to rise, Sensei suddenly said, By the way, how is your father? I said that I did not know, but I assumed that he is no worse since the letters from home that had said nothing about his health. You must not regard your father's illness so lightly. Once there is a uramia poisoning, he will be finished. I had no idea what a uramia poisoning was. The doctor whom I saw during the winter vacation had certainly said nothing about it. You must take really good care of him, said Sensei's wife. When the poison reaches the brain, there's no hope, you know. It's no laughing matter either. I had been smiling uneasily, not knowing what to say. His disease is incurable anyway, I said. There's nothing to be gained by worrying. If you can truly be so resigned about it, she said quietly, then there is nothing more to be said. She lowered her eyes as though she was thinking about her mother, who had died of the same illness. I too began to feel sad about my father's fate. Then Sensei suddenly turned to his wife. Shizu, I wonder if you will die before me. Why? Why? I was just wondering. Or will I die first? It appears that women usually outlive their husbands. Perhaps. But how can one be so sure? Of course, husbands are usually older than their wives. And so you think husbands will die sooner than their wives. In that case, I am certain to leave this world before you, isn't that so? No, not at all. You are different. Really? You are so healthy. You have hardly ever been ill. No doubt I shall be the first to go. Are you sure? Yes, of course. Sensei looked at me. I smiled. What if I do? Sensei's wife hesitated. For a moment, she seemed afraid, as though she had caught a brief glimpse of the life of sorrow she would lead when Sensei was gone, and when she looked up again her mood had changed. What will I do? Why, what do you expect me to do? She said lightheartedly. I shall simply tell myself that death comes to old and young alike, as the saying goes. She deliberately looked at me when she said this. I had been on the point of leaving when the conversation started, but I decided to stay a little longer and keep the two company. What do you think? Sensei asked me. Which of the two would die first was obviously not a question that I could answer intelligently, so I smiled and said, I also do not know what your predestined span of life is. It certainly is a matter of predestination, if nothing else. Sensei's wife said. We are all given a certain number of years to live when we are born. Did you know that Sensei's father and mother died almost simultaneously? On the same day? Well, perhaps not on the same day, but one died very shortly after the other. This I had not known. I thought it rather curious. How was it that they died at the same time? Sensei's wife was about to answer me when she was interrupted by her husband. Don't say any more about it. It is of no interest. Sensei made as much noise as he could with his fan. He then turned to his wife again. Shitsu, this house will be yours when I die. Sensei's wife laughed. You might as well will me the land too. I cannot give you the land since it doesn't belong to me. But everything I own in this house is yours. Thank you very much. But what of use would all those foreign books of yours to me? You can sell them to some second-hand bookshop. And what will I get for them if I do? Sensei did not answer. He continued to talk, however, on the subject of his own death, and all the while he seemed to have taken it for granted that he was going to die before his wife. At first, she seemed determined to treat the subject in frivolous spirit, but eventually the conversation began to oppress her sensitive woman's heart. How many more times you are going to say when I die? For heaven's sake, please don't say when I die again. It's unlucky to talk like that. When you die, I shall do as you wish. There, let there, let that be the end of it. Sensei turned towards the garden and laughed, but to please her, he dropped the subject. It was getting late, so I stood up to go. Sensei and his wife came to the front hall with me. Take good care of your father, she said. Till September then, he said. I said goodbye and stepped out of the house. Between the house and the outer gate there was a bushy osmanthus tree. It spread its branches into the night as if to block my way. I looked at the dark outline of the leaves and thought of the fragrant flowers that would come out in the autumn. I said to myself, I have come to know this tree well, and it has become in my mind an inseparable part of Sensei's house. As I stood in front of me of the tree, thinking of the coming autumn when I would be waking up the path once more, the porch light suddenly went out. Sensei and his wife had apparently gone into their bedroom. I stepped out alone into the dark street. I did not return to my lodgings immediately. There were few things I wanted to buy before going home, and I felt also that I needed a walk after the big dinner that I had eaten. I walked towards the busy part of the town. There, the night had only just begun. The streets were crowded with men and women, who seemed to have come out for no particular purpose. I ran into a university acquaintance who had also graduated that day. He forced me to go into a bar with him. There I had to sit and listen to my fellow graduate, whose talk was as frothy as the beer. It was past midnight when I returned to my room. I had been asked by the family to buy a few things before leaving Tokyo, so I spent the next day shopping despite the heat. That morning, as I set out on my errands, I found myself very annoyed at the prospect of having to walk about the busy street on such a hot day. As I sat in the tram, wiping the perspiration from my face, I began to hate the country people who were always ready to bother others busier than themselves with annoying requests. I did not intend to spend the whole summer in idleness. I had already prepared a kind of daily schedule which I intended to follow when I got home. And so there were books that I had to buy. I went to Maruzen bookshop and prepared to spend half the day there if I need be. I examined carefully all the books that dealt with my subject of study. Of the items I was asked to buy, the one that gave me the most trouble was a chemist set. The apprentice at the shop was willing enough to bring out as many as I wished to see, but I found it difficult to decide which one I should buy. Also, the prices varied greatly. Those I thought would be cheap turned out to be very dear, and those that looked expensive to me turned out to be very cheap. That Precisely what it was that made one camisette better than the other I could not understand. I regretted not having asked Sensei's wife to buy one for me. I bought a suitcase also, of course. It was a cheap one made in Japan, but it had metal fitting that shone brilliantly, and it was impressive enough to stun country people. My mother had asked me in one of her letters to buy such a bag for myself if I graduated, so that I could come home with all the presents packed in it. I laughed when I read the request. I understood my mother's motives, and I was not being unkind when I found it comical. I left Tokyo 3 days later, as had been my intention when I took leave of Sensei and his wife. I was not overly worried about my father in spite of the warnings that Sensei had given me since winter concerning his illness. Rather, I felt rather sorry for my mother, whose life after my father's death I knew would be very lonely. No doubt, I had come to regard it as inevitable that my father should die soon. In a letter to my elder brother in Kyushu, had said that there was no hope of my father's regaining his former health. In another letter, I had advised him to return home that summer if possible to see my father before he died. I had even gone so far as to add in some somewhat emotional strain that we, their children, should feel pity for the old couple that led such lonely lives in the country. When writing such letters, I was quite sincere, but after writing them, my mood would change. On the train, I thought about my own inconsistency. The more I thought about it, the more fickle I seemed, and I became dissatisfied with myself. I then thought of Sensei and his wife, and the evening of my last dinner with them. I remembered Sensei saying, "Which one of us will die first?" And I thought, how can anyone answer such a question? And if Sensei knew the answer, what would he do? What would his wife do if she knew? Probably they would behave exactly as if they did not know. As I am sitting here right now, helpless, though I know that my father is waiting to die, I felt the helplessness of man and the vanity of his life. This is the start of the second chapter, or I don't know, chapter or volume, I guess. My parents and I. What surprised me when I got home was that my father's health seemed not to have changed much during the months I had been away. "So you're back," he said. "I'm glad that you were able to graduate. Wait a minute, I'll go wash my face." I had found him in the garden. He was wearing an old straw hat with a slightly soiled handkerchief attached to the back of the shield of his neck from the sun. The handkerchief swayed in the breeze as he walked towards the well behind the house. I had come to regard a university education as commonplace, and I was touched by my father's unexpected pleasure at my graduation. "I'm glad that you were able to graduate," he said repeatedly. Inwardly, I compared my father's unaffected pleasure with the way Sensei had congratulated me that night at the dinner table. And I had greater admiration for Sensei for his secret contempt for such things as university degrees than I had for my father, who seemed to value them more than they are worth. I began to dislike my father's naive provincialism. "You shouldn't get so excited over such a trifling thing as a university degree," I blurted out. After all, several hundred students graduate every year. My father looked at me strangely. It's simply, it isn't simply your graduation that I am happy about, you know. Of course, I am glad that you graduated, but you don't know all the reasons why I say I'm glad. If only you could understand. I asked him what he meant. He seemed reluctant to tell me, but he finally said, "You see, I am glad for my own sake. As you know, I am a sick man. When you were home last winter, I was convinced that I had no more than 3 or 4 months left to live. Providentially, I am still alive and I am still to potter about comfortably. And now you have graduated. I am happy because of you, who have worked so hard at your studies, managed to graduate before I died, and while I was still in good health. Surely I, as your father, have a reason to be happy. Of course, you have bigger idea than I, but it must annoy you to see me fuss over something so insignificant as your graduation. But try to look at it from my point of view. I am glad not so much for your sake, but as for my own. Do you understand? A moment, please. I said nothing. No word of apology would have expressed how I felt. I hung my head in deep shame. Calmly, he had been waiting for his death, believing that he would die before my graduation, and I would have been too stupid to realize how much it meant to my father to be alive when I graduated. I brought out my diploma from my bag and carefully showed it to my father and mother. I had not packed it well. It was badly creased. "You should have rolled it, carried it with your hand," said my father. "You should have protected it with something stiff," added my mother from her side. My father looked at it for a while and then got up and went to the ornamental alcove in the room, placed it where everyone could see it. Ordinarily, I would have said something, but at that moment I was not my usual self. I had no desire to argue with my parents. I kept quiet and let my father do as he wished. The diploma was made of stiff paper, and having become misshapen in the packing, it refused to stay still. It collapsed each time my father tried to stand it up. I drew my mother aside and asked her about my father's illness. "Is it all right for my father to be so active, going out into the garden, for instance?" "There seems to be nothing the matter with him now. He has probably recovered." My mother was surprisingly optimistic and unconcerned, as is commonly the case with women who live among the woods and fields far from the cities. My mother was quite ignorant about such matters. I remembered a little uneasily how surprised and frightened she had been when when my father had fainted. "But the doctor warned us that your father's illness was serious." "That's why I think there is nothing stranger than a human body. Look at him now, so healthy, in spite of the doctor's anxiety. At first I was worried and tried to keep him still, but you know how he is. He does try to be careful, of course, but he is so stubborn. He has decided he is well and won't listen to whatever I may have to say." I remembered now the last time I had come home, my father had insisted on leaving his bed. "I am all right," he had said after a shave. "Your mother fusses too much." And remembering that occasion, I thought that my mother was not entirely to blame. I had not been on the verge of saying, "But you should take his illness more seriously even if he doesn't," but decided to say nothing after all. It would be unjust, I thought, to chide her. Instead, I told her all I knew about my father's disease. Of course, I knew little more than what Sensei and his wife had told me. My mother seemed not particularly impressed or interested. She only made such remark as, "Is that so? The lady died of the same disease? That's too bad. How old was she when she died?" I gave up trying to convince my mother of the seriousness of my father's illness and decided to speak to my father. He listened to me more attentively than my mother had done. "Of course you are right," he said. "But after all, my body is my own and I know what's good for it and what is not. From experience alone, I should know how to look after it better than anyone else." My mother, when I told her what he had said, smiled wryly and said, "See, what did I tell you?" "But," I said to her, "in spite of what he says, he is preparing to die, you know. That is why he was so glad when I came back with a diploma from the university. He himself was saying to me how fortunate he was that I should have graduated while he was still healthy, not after his death as he had feared." "What he says and what he thinks are quite different things," my mother said. "Secretly, he thinks that he has recovered." "I wonder if you are right," I said. "Why, he intends to live another 10 or 20 years through. He sometimes says depressing things to me too. Only on the other day he said to me, 'It doesn't look as if I'm going to live much longer. What will you do when I'm dead? Do you intend to live alone in this house?' I pictured to myself the large old country house without my father and with only my mother living in it. Could the house be kept up without him? What would my mother do? What will my mother say? Will I be able to leave home and live without worry in Tokyo?" I sat there, facing my mother, and began to think of Sensei's advice that I should try to get my share of the family fortune when my father is still alive. Then my mother said, "There's no need to worry. When did anyone die who kept saying that he's going to die? Despite the fact that your father says he expects to die soon, he'll probably be living many years from now. Rather, it is we who are so certain of our good health that are in real danger." Wondering whether she thought her ideas to be logically irrefutable or statistically demonstrable. Thank you, Deanne. Sit comfortably. How's everyone doing so far? Okay. Don't be too depressed with the death talks, you guys. That's just a parcel of life. I might die tomorrow. Who knows? All right. Let's see. My parents began to discuss my plans for dinner party in my honor. Ever since my return, I had been secretly fearing that such notion might enter their heads. I immediately objected. Don't do anything so elaborate for my sake, please, I said. I hated the kind of guest that comes to country dinner party. They came with one end in view, which was to eat and drink. They were the sort of people that waited eagerly for any event which might provide a break in monotony in their life since childhood. I had hated to see them at our house and to behave respectfully towards them. That they are now to be invited to dinner for my sake made me feel even less friendly towards them. But if we don't, wait, hang on. But elaborate? Certainly not, said my mother. Such occasion as this comes once in a lifetime. It is only natural that we should have guests to celebrate. Don't be so retiring. My mother seemed to attach about as much importance to my graduation as she would have done to my marriage. We don't have to invite them, of course, said my father, but if we don't, there will be talks. He was afraid of gossip. I was certain that our neighbors were hoping to be asked, that if we were disappointed, they would indeed start gossiping. We are not in Tokyo, you know, said my father. Country people are rather fussy and resentful. You must consider your father's reputation too, says my mother. I could not go on being stubborn. I began to think that it would be better to let my parents do as they please. I was merely saying that you need not do it for my sake. But if you are afraid of gossip, then of course it's a different matter. Who am I to insist something that may do you harm? You embarrass me with your argumentative talk, said my father sourly. It isn't that your father is saying that we are not having a party for your sake, said my mother, but even you must be aware that one's duty to one's neighbors. My mother, like all women, was inclined at times to make incoherent remarks in loquacity. However, she was more than a match for my father and me even when we sided against her. The trouble with education, said my father, is that it makes a man argumentative. He said no more then, but in that simple remark I saw clearly that the character of his resentment towards me, which I had sensed before, not realizing that I myself was being rather difficult. I felt strongly the injustice of my father's reproach. That evening there was a change in my father's mood. He asked when it would be convenient to hold a dinner party. He knew exactly, he knew perfectly well that I was then spending my time in complete idleness. His asking the question was therefore his way of trying to bring about a reconciliation. I could not but be touched by my father's gentleness, and I became more obedient. After a short discussion, we agreed upon the date. Before the day of the dinner party arrived, however, an important event took place. Emperor Meiji was taken ill. This news was spread throughout the nation by newspapers, reached us like a gust of wind blowing away the plans for a graduation party which had been tentatively made, not without difficulty, in an insignificant country house. I think that we had to better cancel the dinner, said my father when he read the news, looking at me over the top of his spectacles. He then became silent. It seemed to me that he was thinking of his own illness. I sat quietly too, thinking of the emperor who had so recently attended the graduation ceremony at the university as he wont to do every year. I brought out the books from my suitcase, and in the silent old house, too large for the three of us, and began to read them.
For some reason, I could not settle down. It had been easier to study in the middle of bustling Tokyo, in a small room on second floor of the boarding house where I could hear the distant sounding of the running trams. I had found no difficulty in concentrating on whatever I was reading. Once I found myself dozing over my books, and sometimes I went as far as to bring out my pillow and take a nap in earnest. I would wake up to the cry of the cicadas, which at first would seem to have been a part of my dreams, and then suddenly I would be fully awake and find the harsh cry almost unbearable. Sometimes I would lie still and listen to it for a moment or two, and my heart would fill with sadness. I wrote to various friends. Sometimes I sent short notes written on postcards and sometimes long letters. Some to my friends who were still in Tokyo, and some had gone home to distant provinces. Some wrote back, some did not. I did not, of course, forget Sensei. Wrote him a long letter covering three double pages of foolscap paper with small handwriting. Told him all that happened to me since my return. As I sealed the envelope, I wondered if Sensei would still be in Tokyo. It was the custom whenever Sensei and his wife went away about for a lady about 50 with her hair cut and let down in the style affected by gentlewomen of her age to come and look after the house. Once when I asked Sensei who the lady was, he asked me in return, "Who do you think she is?" When I said that I took her from some relation of his, he replied, "But I have no relations." Indeed, Sensei he had come to ignorance completely the existence of his family in his home province. The lady, it turned out, was related to Sensei's wife. I thought of this lady then as I went out to post my letter, and I wondered whether she would have sense the kindness to forward it. I Should Sensei and his wife have left by the time it reached Tokyo, I knew of course that I had said nothing of importance in the letter. It is simply that I was lonely and I hoped for a reply from him. But it never came. My mother did not show much interest. Oh, hello. Oh, hey, Ando. Hey, Diane. Thank you so much for coming over. My father did not show much interest in chess as he had done previous winter. The chessboard lay in the corner of the ornamental alcove covered in dust. He seemed more quiet than ever since the emperor's illness. Every day he would wait for the newspaper to arrive, and when it came he would read it first. Then he would bring it to me and say, "Look, there's more news of the Majesty today." He always referred the emperor as His Majesty. "I don't wish to seem irreverent," he once said, "but it does look as if His Majesty's illness is not unlike mine." I could see deep anxiety on his face as he said this, and I thought to myself, how long will it be before he faints again? "But I'm sure His Majesty will be all right," my father said. "Why, if a worthwhile fellow like me can be up and about like this." Despite his attempt at being optimistic, however, I suspected that he feared the worst for himself. "Father is really worried about his illness, you know," I said to my mother. "It doesn't look as if he expects to live another 10 or 20 years, as you seem to think he did." My mother appeared to be perplexed by my words. "Why don't you persuade him to play chess with you?" she said. I brought the chessboard out and dusted it. My father's health grew steadily worse. The straw hat with the handkerchief attached to it, which had so amazed me when I first saw it on my father, now was laid aside. Every time I saw it laying on the smoke blackened shelf, I felt pity for him. Before, when he had been active, I had wished that he would not move about so much. But I hated to see him lose his vigor, to find him sitting about the house so quietly. My mother and I talk often about my father's health. It's just his mood, he once said. He is depressed. He seemed to think that my father was depressed because of the emperor's illness. I could not agree with her. I don't think it's simply his mood, I said. I think he is feeling really ill. I began to I began then to consider seriously calling in a good specialist once more and have him examine my father. You cannot be enjoying yourself very much this summer, my mother said. We haven't even celebrated your graduation. Your father hasn't been feeling well, and now His Majesty. We should have a dinner party immediately after your return. I had come home on the 5th or 6th of July, and it was a week after that my parents had started discussing the plans for dinner. They had then decided to hold it the following week. One might say that due to the easygoing ways of my parents, who, like all country people, could do nothing in a hurry, I had been spared an unpleasant social obligation. My mother, but my mother, who did not understand me, could not see this. When the newspaper announcing the emperor's death arrived, my father said, "Oh, oh!" and then, "Oh! His Majesty has gone at last. I too." My father then fell silent. I went to town to buy some black crepe. We wrapped a piece of paper of it around the golden ball at the end of the flagpole, and then another piece of crepe. We made a ribbon about 3 inches wide and hung it from the pole near the top. The pole, then attached, slanted to one of the gate posts. The air was very ill. Both the flag and the black ribbon hung limply. The old gate of our house had thatched roof over it. The thatch had acquired a greyish ash-like hue from years of exposure to wind and rain. One could see that one could see that in places it has become very uneven. I went out alone into the road and looked at the white muslin flag with the red rising sun in the center. The flag and the black ribbon dangling by its side stood out in relief against the dirty grey of the thatch. A question that Sensei had once asked me suddenly came to my mind. "What is your house like?" he had asked. "I wonder if the style of architecture in your part of country is different from that in mine." I wanted Sensei to see the old house where I was born, but at the same time I felt a little ashamed of it. I went back to the house and I sat at the desk, and as I read the newspaper, I thought of far off Tokyo. I imagined this city, the greatest in all of Japan, immersed in gloom, yet bustling with activity despite the darkness. There was but one light shining that came from Sensei's house. I could not know then that this light too would be swallowed up by silent whirlpool. I could not know that very soon that this light would be snuffed out and that I would be left in a world of total darkness. Thinking that I would write to Sensei about the death of the emperor, I picked up my pen. After I had written 10 lines or so, I decided to write to not write the letter after all. I tore up the piece of paper and threw the bits into the waste paper basket. I thought that it would be senseless to write him about such a matter. Besides, I had little hope of getting a reply from him. If only he would write to me, I thought, knowing that I had begun the letter simply out of loneliness. Sometime towards the middle of August, I received a letter from a friend of mine asking if I would be interested in a post in a certain provincial secondary school. The friend, through economic necessity, had been spending a great deal of his time looking for such posts for himself. The post had been offered to him, but since he had already accepted an offer from a school in a better district, he had been considerate enough to inform me of an opening. I wrote back immediately, saying that I was not interested and suggesting that he write to a mutual friend of ours who I knew was desperate wanting a teaching post. After I had posted the letter, I told my parents of the opening. They showed no displeasure when they heard that I had decided not to consider it. Surely there is no need for you to go to such a place, they said. You will get a better offer. I began to suspect that my parents had rather high hopes for my future, and it soon became clear that in their ignorance they were expecting their university educated son to find an important position with a huge salary. You must realize, I said, that good jobs are extremely hard to come by these days. Please remember that my field of specialization is quite different from my elder brother's. Things have changed too since his days. You mustn't think that I am in the same happy situation that as he was when he graduated. But you are a university graduate all the same, said my father sullenly. You mustn't blame us if we now expect you to be financially independent. It's rather embarrassing, not to have an answer when I'm asked now that your younger son has graduated, what is he going to do? The little community of which my father had been part of so many years was his world, and he could not think beyond it. What he wanted me to do was find a position worthy of my qualifications so that his reputation in the community would not be harmed. He did not wish to be embarrassed when his neighbors asked him, I suppose your son will be earning a lot of money now that he has graduated from the university, or he will be earning about 100 yen a month perhaps. To my parents, who was inclined to regard the great metropolis of my base of operations, must have seemed as weird as a creature that walked with his feet up in the air. Indeed, I myself sometimes felt as an alien to my surroundings as such being would have done. I decided to say nothing rather than try to explain to them clearly what my feelings were. The gulf between us was too great. This is the sort of occasion that one tries to make one's contact, said my mother. Now, what about this man sensei that you're constantly talking about? That was the extent of her understanding of my friendship with sensei. She could not be expected to see that through sensei, though sensei might advise me to make sure my inheritance before my father died, he was not the sort of person that would go out of his way to help me find a position. And what does this sensei do? Asked my father. He does nothing, I replied. It was my impression that I had already told my father and my mother that sensei did nothing. And if I was not mistaken in thinking so, then my father should have remembered this. Tell me, said my father, not without sarcasm, why is it that he does nothing? One would think that such a man as he, whom you seem to respect so highly, would find some kind of employment. What he really meant to say, it seemed to me, was that any man worth his salt would find some useful occupation, and that a ne'er-do-well would be content to live in idleness. True, I don't earn regular salary, my father continued, but you must admit that even a simple fellow like me finds something to do. No one can say that I do nothing. I still remain silent. No, if this man is as clever as you say he is, said my mother, then I'm sure he will find you a job. Have you asked him? No, I said. Well, now, that won't do, will it? Said my mother. Why don't you ask him? Write him a letter. Yes, I said half-heartedly and left the room. And that is where we are going to end today's session. Thank you so much for staying with me the entire time, you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. How are you guys feeling about the story so far? Hmm? Thank you, Deanne, for coming in, dropping by. Hello, everyone. Come, let's talk about the story a little bit. What do you guys feel about the parents? What do you guys feel about the whole country people versus city people thing? Cause I have thoughts about that. Aw, you're welcome, Savri, and thank you so much for being here in game and also on my Twitch, listening to me reading. I always appreciate it when you guys are here in game and also listening in Twitch as well. Sorry, I really need to make the sessions about 2 hours long and not too long because I am a cat really wears me out every time I finish it. And at least with Kokoro, I make sure that it's around 2 hours that I feel very at least I don't feel too um, tired, I would say, after I finish a reading session. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, you guys. Seriously, I really appreciate it. Oh yeah, let me. Thank you so much. Right? Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You think that they are being too harsh on Sensei? I think because you put yourself in the position of Sensei, and I think that you should not do that. Um, in this kind of literature, in this kind of writing or novels, I think you should read it as a story and don't relate yourself with any of the character. Try your best, even though the book is written in a first person view, right, from the student's point of view. don't don't be led to think don't be led to, how do I say this, don't put yourself into the character. From my point of view, I don't think that they are harsh about the sensei, because think about it. Do you think the sensei is affected by what all these people are talking about him? No. I think he doesn't give a shit. I think sensei is living in his own world. Everyone has a story to tell, so we are listening the story from the student point of view. Not really? Not really as in? I just don't think, yeah, I don't think the sensei will be affected by anyone's words about him because he has already given up on humanity long time ago. So it's fine. I think he's going to be fine. Harsh maybe? I don't think it's harsh. It is pure fact that he doesn't it is pure fact that he doesn't do anything with his life that is like worthy, you know? Yeah. So yeah, he definitely not going to be affected by anyone. So number one, there's that. Number two, don't don't relate your own life with the characters in the book, even though it is written in first person point of view. I personally don't relate with the student at all. I think he is a little bit too self-absorbed at times. Yeah, but I also understand his point of view.
It's a good story for sure, and the way it's written is very very good in my opinion. Like you get to know Sensei as much as you get to know the writer himself. He's pushy because he is young and naive. I don't know how old are you, but young people tend to think that I think young people are usually extremely optimistic about life, especially especially when they are in their early 20s. Yeah, he's definitely a very self-absorbed. Like when you I know he's writing this from his point of view, but you don't really see him talk about friends or anyone at all. I'm old too. I'm really old. So yeah, he doesn't even say like his friend's name, or he doesn't even say anything like he cares about. Like he doesn't when you read the point of view of the student, he has no friends. He seems to me a very self-absorbed person who has an ideal of who has an ideal of who Sensei is, and like he idolized Sensei for reasons that are all very wrong. Yeah, for reasons he basically put Sensei on a pedestal, and he's going to be disappointed. That as far as I can tell, he's going to be very disappointed, and Sensei already warned him about that. Yeah, and slowly we are discovering it with him. So that's why I really like this book, because the way it's written, like the step by step how we are slowly, getting to know Sensei, is very very good. So yeah. Anyway, a great big thank you to everyone who dropped by today, despite, yeah, he's trying to fit Sensei into his ideal mold. Definitely, Severy, 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you. Yeah. He made this ideal of Sensei and put him on the pedestal, and then when Sensei doesn't respond in the way that he expected Sensei to, he feels disappointed or he feels upset. Very self-absorbed young man, this one. Yeah. But yes, I'm going to take a lunch break and then I'll be back. And in game, I won't stream until later tonight. I'm going to be playing Borderlands with my friends tonight. If you guys are interested in watching me play a first-person shooter game, come drop by at 7 p.m. GMT plus 8. I will be tweeting live as well when I go live. But once again, thank you. Oh, sorry. Uh, Thank you, Kiana, for dropping by. Thank you so much. Thank you to Exia once again. I know Ando ran away before I managed to bow. And thank you, Sari. Sari always has some. Yeah, Sari seems to be a very. Oh, Ando is still there. Let me, let me. Thank you so much, Ando. I will drop by to your cafe later with Deanne. And thank you, Deanne, for being a superb manager as well. And I'll see you guys soon. And I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to decide whether you want to redeem anything from the channel points. And after that, I'm going to sign out. Anything you want to redeem? A quote? A poem? Maybe next time? Sure. Collect more points. Severy? Anything you want? Exia? Anything you want? The unnamed viewers. A quote. Exia wants a quote on love. All right. Thank you so much for for patronizing me. You can claim up to page 128. You can choose. Sorry, you can choose up to page 128. Exia. Oh, so everyone's a tarot. Exia, page number, please. While I go get my tarot deck. Page 1. Wow. Hey, wait. 4? Okay, 4. Alright. Okay, I'll follow the chat, the stream chat, okay? Page 4. It's alright. Nothing too difficult. Oh shit. Sorry, you can choose from page. I'm sorry, Exia. You can choose from page 10 to page 128. I'm sorry. Don't worry, Sevri, I will guide you. It's okay, Exia. I'll just choose one for you. Okay? You are being indecisive right now. Or maybe the stream is too slow. I don't 50. Okay. Yeah, I think the stream is like slower. Okay, page 50. Love doesn't bring and never has brought happiness. On the contrary, it's a constant Oh my god, sorry, let me allow me to restart that again. That's terrible. Yeah. Love doesn't bring and never has brought happiness. On the contrary, it's a constant state of anxiety, a battlefield. It's sleepless nights, asking ourselves all the time if we are doing the right thing. Real love is composed of ecstasy and agony. There you go. Thank you for claiming a love quote by Paulo Coelho. And for Severy, it's very simple, Severy. You can ask a question that you want an answer to. Like, will my crush like me or something like that? I'm just giving an example. Like, you can ask a very like vague question like that. Or you can simply just say that you want a card of the day. So it's either a question or a card of a day, and then you tell me how many times I have to shuffle, and then whether I should pick the card from the top deck or from a spread deck. So let me know. Will you get an in-house game? That is up to Yoshi P, but okay, I will.
I will entertain your question. So, how many times should I shuffle the deck? 7 times? And then pick the top. Okay, listen, yeah? I'm not gonna cheat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Will Savory be able to get an in-house game? In-game house. Oh my god. You have sorry. You have the 8 of swords. 8 of swords. The key words for 8 of swords is entrapment. Self-undoing. Fear. Helplessness. Bondage. Denial. Deception. So I think you will be getting that in-house game because you'll be bound to it, I think. Yeah, I don't know because you're being trapped. The picture of the card, you go Google 8 of swords. The picture of the cards is you being all tied up and blindfolded and then being surrounded by 8 swords. So, yeah. So let me read you the description of the card, okay? This card means a card of self-undoing. This is the you are your own worst enemy card. You need to do something, but you are unwilling to act. Perhaps you are in denial about a situation. Consequently, you are stuck in a painful state. However, the card says that you have the resources to get out if only you can overcome your fear. So, in my personal opinion, you will be getting the house because entrapment. And you have to stay sub to the game to keep the house. So my opinion is that you will get the house. Or because another keyword is that is denial. So it could also mean that you are in denial that you would be able to get the house. So it can go either way. But from my perspective is that you will be getting the house because you are going to be trapped into this game. So yes, you will be getting the house. Diane, I haven't done your card of the day. Do you want to do it on stream? Let's do it on stream. Diane? Might as well. Give me your instructions. I do free ones for Diane every day because she's my manager. The perks of being my manager. Go join the lottery. Go do it. I already joined the lottery as well. I hope that. And the last I checked, I'm still the only one. The black card, one time, don't cut, and on top. Okay, hang on. I get the black cards.
Diane really likes the black card for some reason. Eh? Okay. Shuffle one time, don't cut, and on top. Alright. If you say so, Diane. This is gonna be Diane's card of the day. Shuffle one time. Don't cut. Take from the top. You have a very, very good card. You have Four of Wands. Four of Wands. Wands usually represents creativity, activity, movements. And Four of Wands, if you look at the picture, it depicts a couple getting married. And the wands are like decorations for. Okay, so Four of Wands. Keywords: success, comfort, prosperity, reaping rewards, and celebration. An extremely positive card. The Four of Wands signifies happiness, success, comfort, and security. You have used your energy and talents wisely and work hard. Now you are reaping the rewards due to you. It's time to relax and enjoy your life. You have a very good card. It's a your card of the day is very good. That means you will have a very, very positive day. Very, very fun day. Awesome, Diane. Are you happy? You really like the black deck, huh? I have 3 different tarot decks. One is like black and white. One is the normal Raider weight ones. That one I used to read for Sari just now, and then another one is a personal deck that I don't really use to read for other people mostly. Yeah, nice card, Diane. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for attending again once again. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to read to you guys. And I'll see you all soon. I'll see you all tonight if you guys want to watch me play Borderlands. Borderlands 1. See you guys. Have a good day. Have a good day. Have a good day.